Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Rennie. This is the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we look back at the previous week in football and/or soccer and tackle the things that we thought were interesting. Alongside me for today's program is MLS legend, top broadcaster, and a man who looks impossibly and frustratingly young. It's Brian Dunseth. Hi, Dun. Are you all right?
I'm getting grays, Rennie. You can't be that young. Look at this thing right here. It's all like, I was plucking them for a while and they just kept coming back. Little weeds in the grass. I'm doing good, man. Tio Max Bretos and I were on that RSL Portland call at the weekend. That was incredible. I got a weekend home. I got to be at home. I got to watch my boys play soccer. Got to watch my son Shia and his Avalanche team beat Real Salt Lake's Arizona team. I got to watch Micah play football and win his game. And then I got to watch Luca do the gritty as he kept scoring goals once again. So, man, I had a great weekend. Everything was fantastic out here. How about you? How was your weekend?
I very much enjoyed doing the commentary of Man City against Arsenal, which we're going to talk about on today's program.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. It was a fantastic game. It was so much better as a game, as a piece of entertainment, a piece of drama, than I think any of us thought it was going to be going in. I loved, sorry, Tim, the fucking housery, sorry, Tim, of Arsenal. I thought about you the entire game, and I didn't know how many times I could say Dunsethery to an audience that wasn't just like ours.
Yeah.
So I did drop it in a couple of times.
I heard it once. Yeah. I heard it once. The boys in the back were like, "Did Rennie just say Dunsethery?" And I started giggling. I said, "Yes, he did."
I'm making this a thing. I'm going to continue this for the rest of. If I work for another 25 years, I'm making this a thing.
I said it this weekend too.
It's so good.
I did against the RSL Portland Timbers game. I said, "Listen, Max." I goes, "Listen, Tio Max. You know I love the Dunsethery, the dark arts, the manipulation between the white lines. Like
it's in your head."
Yeah, and he's like, he just looks at me and goes, "You're an idiot." Well, yeah, that's fair. Whatever.
He should. Well, firstly, Bretos should be subscribing to this show to know this reference. Make sure he listens to this program because he's now in it. But yeah, we're making it a thing. We're making it a thing. But it was fantastic. I enjoyed it. I was happy with the kind of last goal as well in terms of the way I did it. But also this weekend, I got to say, on early Saturday, I took my friend James, who's a big Chelsea fan, to West Ham Chelsea. We'll talk about that on today's program because I have some thoughts on Lopetegui that I'd like to deliver with swearing. But it was funny. We went to the game together, and I'd kind of given up on life after 4 minutes. So we had quite a nice time. I had quite a nice time, forgive me. And then I'm so annoyed. And then afterwards, we went to this little area at the Bowl of Disappointments. They've started doing this thing where you can have a drink in the stand in the stadium for like 90 minutes, drinking time. And they opened this area up called the Barrels underneath the big screen, away to if you're looking at it on screen and look left. Behind that goal, there's a big screen, and in front of that, there's a load of barrels, and it's fake grass, and it's like being in a pub garden. It's really cool. So we went there for half an hour, have a drink, wind down. I was going home, and we bumped into my dad. And he came over. He'd been out with his friends, having a few drinks. He was about to go meet them, and he was like, "Oh, Tom, how you doing? All right." And he chatted. He was super pissed, like he'd been with his mates all day that he's known since like 1970 or whatever. And he just ranted at us for like 25 minutes. And James turned to me afterwards and was like, "I could have told you that was your dad, even if you didn't tell me."
I was going to say.
Which I thought was excellent.
Now I know where he got it from.
He was just like, "Oh, yeah, I knew that. You didn't have to tell me. It's fine. I knew who that was. We've got the same face and head and mannerisms." So I thought that was excellent. Anyway, look, I want to get to it. So we're going to get to, I want to talk about Juan Lopetegui, West Ham, Chelsea and all that. I want to find out what's going on in MLS. We're getting towards the end of the season. But the big game has happened. One of two games that I keep saying that Arsenal have to win if they are to be champions. Ric Flair rules. To be the man, you've got to beat the man. And Arsenal did nearly everything right in this game in terms of scoring 2 goals. They lose a player, and then they hold on for dear life. The low block here, Danny, I'd love you to talk to us a bit about the low block and the deep low block and the way they executed it, because it was fascinating to watch. But it was such a great tactical idea, risky, that they kept letting Ruben Dias have the ball and they were crowding the box. I mean, it was textbook low block stuff, and they so nearly get there. And then they concede that late goal and it goes 2-2. You know my theory, it's going to be 95 points to win the league. That's already 4 points dropped for Arsenal this season, 2 draws that may have been wins. And I think they've got to beat City twice. For me, I think that was catastrophic for Arsenal,
Hmm.
conceding that late goal. What did you make to the way the game went? Ebbed and flowed, fair result. Give us your view.
Yeah, I'm going to come at it from a different angle. I think at the end of the 90, whatever, 8 minutes, 99 minutes, not the finish that Arsenal felt they deserved based on the performance they put in the second half. So let's get that out of the way. They'll be disappointed that they left 2 points on the table. I'll agree with you there. But where I'll go with a different angle is I think that this performance once again solidified what Arsenal is capable of doing, specific to the first half, very specific to the second half as well. Because what it does is it I think it raises that watermark of what they're capable of doing. And if you're Man City, the Dunsettery, the dark arts, the manipulation, the shits and giggles, sorry, Tim, all that stuff, that they as much as they won't say, and like, afterwards Erling Haaland like be humble, and like his whole antics with Gabby Jesus and Mikel Arteta and throwing the ball off of Gabriel, which absolutely should have been a bare minimum of a yellow card. I'm actually disappointed that hasn't been handled better.
Mm.
Um, but at the end of the day, I think Man City has to be just a little bit more nervous about what Arsenal is capable of doing. I am of the belief that these two matchups in league play aren't going to determine whether either team wins the Premier League trophy. I
Mm.
think it's going to be the other games and the slip ups and the dropped points that is going to determine who will be the winner at the end of this Premier League season. But this is exactly what we wanted, man. We wanted two big old heavyweights smashing each other, showing what they're capable of doing. And to your point about tactics, listen, I think we were all of the assumption that because Mikel Arteta was Pep Guardiola's assistant for a couple of seasons upon his retirement from football, that he was automatically going to become a Pep Guardiola light. That certainly has
Mm.
not been the case.
No.
He took over a club in which he tried to change the mantra, the self belief, the culture, the roster, the infrastructure. And remember, there was a lot of spider webs that needed to be unwoven because of the departure of Arsene Wenger and Sven Mislintat and Raul Sanlehi and all of those guys, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Mesut Ozil, David Luiz. I mean, there was a lot of things happening. So when he comes in, he gets that trophy right off the bat, and then things have been kind of a slow burn, which was let's incrementally get better and better, build this roster, find the right personalities. And all of us kind of made fun of Mikel Arteta a couple of years ago when Amazon All or Nothing, the Arsenal season came out, because we were just seeing clips of, stick figures and like clocks and like light bulbs and all these different things. And what I think we failed to realize in that moment, because we weren't on the inside, was that he was absolutely building something that we are slowly seeing ramping up. And, listen, I think the other reality is if Man City doesn't exist with Pep Guardiola right now, Arsenal very likely is a Premier League champion
Yeah.
underneath Mikel Arteta. So, all of that being said, tactically, shape, identity, set pieces, picks, um, what do we call it? Red mist, moments of reaction, moments of provocation. I loved it because this game had absolutely everything, and the
Yeah.
manipulation of each other within those moments of the games and these fine details ultimately allowed Man City back into this game. But notwithstanding losing Rodri to that ACL injury, which is going to be absolutely devastating, because they can replace the situational play, but they can't replace the player. And thank God Ilkay Gundogan came back from Barcelona, because I think that move, that free transfer, is going to be that much bigger, considering the loss of Rodri is going to be absolutely massive for this club.
We'll get back to Roger in a second because I wanted to get your view on the entirety of the season and what he brings to them. But I want to go back to the yellow card for Leandro Trossard, right? Because a couple of weeks ago we had the Declan Rice incident against Brighton, and I think that there was too much hysteria about that, and there was the whole like Ian Wright saying something like the ball is moving, all this sort of stuff, right? He clearly had a momentary, like we all
Reaction.
do,
Yeah.
reaction. He
Yeah.
kicked the ball away. He shouldn't have done it. He could have got away with it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but he's got no defense. In this one, this is so blatant what Leandro Trossard has done. And Chris Perry was alongside me in commentary. He's great, Chris. He's a really good analyst and he's sympathetic to footballers as well, I think. And he basically said, did Trossard hear the whistle? Right. And there's a conversation to be had there. We don't know. I don't know. But when he's jumped into Bernardo Silva, he knows he's given a free kick away. It's a clear. I thought that was a yellow card offence. That was
I
a
thought it was a yellow
horrible,
too. I didn't realize it
horrible
was for kicking
tackle.
the ball away until
So
halftime.
at the time, we didn't realize, but we got that PL Match sent Twitter thing, and so we got a bit of clarity a couple of minutes later, which has been a nice little innovation actually. But that could have been a yellow card, but he knew it was a foul. It then runs away. Now, I would absolutely go with the argument that he might not have heard it if he tries to play the ball, like he looks for a through ball or he tries
Smashed
to take
it.
on the defender. He walloped it as far as possible to wind down the clock because he knew there were seconds left before the whistle was going to go. This is like pissing in someone's pocket and telling him it's raining, right? This is what this whole thing is. They know it happened. We know it happened. And the only thing to say here is this happens to everybody. This has happened to every player, every person in their life. They've had a moment where they have just done something really inexplicably stupid. And if Leandro Trossard could have thought about that for another second, he wouldn't have done it if he realized he was on a yellow card, but there's so much going on and all this is happening. You think, yeah, fine, right? But to come out afterwards and be like, we've been robbed, this whole narrative they continue to gestate with all like, there's a conspiracy, they hate us, Michael Oliver hates us. Michael Oliver could get an assist for for Arsenal's first goal for pulling the fullback out of position. So we could talk about competence, sure, but there's no conspiracy.
About the pick on Ederson as well. Yeah, I mean, there's.
But I just think like if one of my teammates had been involved in a really high profile kicking the ball away incident 2 weeks ago, I probably wouldn't do it again in a more obvious way 2 weeks later. That to me is a failure of Trossard. It's a failure of discipline. And I think it's a big story here that he couldn't keep his discipline in a crucial 60 seconds. That's what's going to cost you. That's what did cost him.
I'm not sure I heard anything after you said it's like pissing in my pocket and telling me it's raining. I've never heard that one. I've heard people say, "Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining," but I've never. Does somebody pissed in your pocket? I bet you pissed in somebody's pocket in a club.
Do I get the fifth if I'm English? Is that how it works? Can I play the fifth?
Is yours big enough to fit in someone's pocket?
Fit in your fucking trouser leg, mate. Sorry, Tim.
Oh man, I love you. Yeah, listen. When I watched it, I was in the car and I had your commentary on, and I had the app on, right? So I'm watching the game, listening to commentary, and immediately it didn't even dawn on me the kicking the ball away. I thought he's sitting on yellow, the stupid, and I use this as an analyst. And I used to do this as a player. I used to say to the referee in moments where I've been bundled or my goalkeeper's been bundled into an aerial challenge, he's not even watched the fucking ball. Sorry, Tim. He's just looking at the player. And so that's like the analogy that I use during a broadcast without the F-bomb. I just say, always keep an eye on the attacking player in the replay because you want to see where he's sightlining. Is he sightlining the ball the entire time? Because that for me is fair challenge no matter what. Or is he looking at the player and then, leaning into him? Trossard never makes a play for the ball. Not once does he, after the ball pops up, he's just looking to wallop who's around him. And to your point, that for me, I was like, well, that's a yellow at any other moment in the game. It doesn't really matter taking in the complexity of managing this game and not want to like overcomplicate it by sending a player off. But then when he takes 3 more steps and boots the ball 60 yards, you're like, well, okay, I mean, there's no way to, like, when he puts his hands in his head, like, oh my God, why would you give me a yellow card? It's like, hold on a second, your actions justify while you're being shown the yellow card. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with it. Now that being said, here's the complexity of this conversation. The problem, there's very, very few times is situational play like for like, right? So the immediate post game, he brings up Jeremy Doku for delaying the restart of the play, and he's going to say, "Hold on, isn't that like for like?" Very few times the evidence is equitable. That being said, when you have Howard Webb and these referees coming out publicly and doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on delaying of the restart is an absolute yellow card, well, then there's no gray area. This has to be an absolute across the board. And the problem is it's not absolute. And the problem is sometimes this is double jeopardy. And the double jeopardy is that not only is it the red card, but then it's the fact that these guys are playing down for 10 minutes in arguably the worst and most difficult environment to play in at the Etihad. So while I am sympathetic to Mikel Arteta, I'm also going to call a little bit of bullshit every once in a while. Sorry, Tim, because these managers are trying to use other moments to then maybe declassify what the yellow should have or should not have been for their player. But again, to your point, the moment that you're shown yellow card, it doesn't matter at what moment in the game, but specific to the first half. Every single time any of us were shown yellow in the first half, you hesitate. You have to hesitate. You have to be 100% sure that you're going to smash that ball or win that ball, or you then have to be reactive versus proactive. And if you are more proactive than reactive, you're going to be a little bit more reckless. You're going to put yourself a little bit more in that gray area. And I always say this, don't allow the referee to make a decision. And if you put yourself in a situation where the referee has to make a decision, well, that's a bad spot to be in if you're a player on the field.
One final piece on the yellow card. There was one conspiracy theory I did think was interesting because, we memory whole seasons and you remember the macro, not the micro. Patrick Timmons put on social media, Mike Oliver was the referee who didn't give Kovacic a second yellow card at Emirates Stadium last season because he didn't want to ruin the game. And Kovacic, as I recall, it did a really horrible challenge and should have got a second yellow, was subbed quite quickly afterwards because he was going to get sent off. So, look, again, I don't think that's evidence of conspiracy, but I do think that's... it did, in a way, ruin the game. It made it more dramatic this weekend, the one we just had. But, no one's complaining if Mike Oliver goes, look, mate, don't make me do this. Just like, I'm not going to give you a yellow card. No one's complaining, but there's no defense because I think it's stupidity.
Can I add one thing before we move on?
Yeah.
What I think this is, I think this is a massive reference point for Mikel Arteta in this Arsenal group. Because while the disappointment of not holding on for 3 points is evident, and it might have a crucial effect when it's all said and done, when we're looking back and, doing our post-mortem of where teams dropped points over the course of the season. I think Mikel Arteta can look at his group and his group can look at each other and say, we put in a fucking shift today. Sorry, Tim. Like, we were animals. We were dogs. Like, we did the business today. Like, as much as it didn't end the way we want, like, look at what we did today. Had we had 11 players on the field, we would have walked away with 3 points. There's going to be a weird manipulation of this story that I think has crazy ripples as the season goes on. Because again, I just think this is one more step closer for Arsenal to kind of pulling away whatever this grip, this vice grip that Man City's had on the Premier League.
And that might be aided by the fact Rodri is going to be out for an extended period of time. I haven't seen confirmation of ACL yet, but it looks like it probably is.
He's in Barcelona, so that tells you, yeah.
It is, but I don't want to say it is and it ends up being something else. But look, he's going to be out for a long, long time. And here's some raw data for you: 174 games with Rodri, 129 wins, 26 draws, 19 losses, a win rate of 74%, loss rate of just under 11%. Without him, 21 games, 13 wins, 1 draw, 7 losses, a win rate of a still impressive 62%, 12% off, 33% loss rate. They lose games statistically and provably more without Rodri than they do with. Those stats go back to 2019-20 when he joined the club. Danny Higginbottom was with me on the football show on Sirius XM FC earlier today, and he said he makes Arsenal favourites to win the title. Now Rodri is missing. What say you?
I can understand why Danny says that, and I love the angles in which Danny presents his arguments. Here's the only thing I'll say. I think you can do a job by committee that doesn't necessarily need to replicate like for like. Rodri is the best player in his position in the world, in my humble opinion, for the role that he plays. I still think he is woefully underrated when it comes to kind of the superstardom that is kind of our acknowledgement of the elite players. But when you compare and contrast him in that position, it's hard to say who could do the same exact things as well as he can. Here's the thing, though. I think this will be important for Gundogan. It'll be important for John Stones. It could even be important for Akanji, in that those guys can play in that position and stunt whatever the transition moments are. The reality is, I mean, let's be painfully obvious. There's really going to be about 3 or 4 games where Rodri's truly going to be missed, right? It's going to be against Arsenal. It's going to be against Liverpool. It's probably be against Manchester United. And then we can judge Chelsea, the Villas, the Tottenhams, and all of that. But those are going to be the big dogs. And then when you're in Champions League, specific being away, that's when I think you'll really miss him. So I'm not trying to downplay the loss, but the reality is that Man City is just going to walk all over a majority, 95% of the teams that they're coming up against. But those hiccups, every time there's a mistake, the immediate reference point is going to be if they had Rodri. So I can see where I don't know if I'm buying what Danny's selling, but I can see why he's selling it.
I mean, I think the issue is that I keep saying this, that the average that City have brought to the Premier League in the last 5 or 6 years has been so astronomically high that by my rationale, you've got to get 95 points to be champions. That means that someone like Arsenal, they've got 19 points to lose, of which 4 have already been dropped. That leaves you with 15 left to drop across the season. The question would be, can they achieve a season from this point where they only drop 15 more points, which is a gargantuan task? And the other question would be, can City lose 6 games? This was one of the games they were this close to losing and did not lose it. The average without Rodri suggests they will lose some, but one of those big challenges has already been mounted by City and they got over it. So I still don't see it. I still don't think City are going to lose enough games, and I still think that Arsenal had to beat them. But we'll see. The proof will be in this 10-month pudding. Haaland, briefly on him, 100 goals in 105 games, equaling a record set by Cristiano Ronaldo when he went to Real Madrid some 15, 18 years ago, whatever that was. I mean, just the numbers themselves. He's not a player who, I remember working on a game that Wayne Rooney played in years ago, and the co-commentator said to me something like, if you put Wayne Rooney at right back, he'd be the best right back. If he was at centre back, he'd be the best centre back. He was such a amazing all-round footballer. I think Erling Haaland would be the crappiest winger in football history. But in this very specific thing that he does, is this the best we've ever seen?
I think when it all, well, I mean, listen, we've been talking about him. I can remember hearing about his 7 goals against Honduras in the Under-17 World Cup in Poland. I remember hearing about him up in Norway before he went to Red Bull Salzburg because of the connection with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and the desire to bring him to Manchester United. Now, whether that was feasible, doable, or because of the history with his father and Roy Keane, if that was ever going to happen, who knows? Even when he went to Borussia Dortmund, he got his hattie in like 5 minutes on his debut. But the conversations were always like, yeah, but Premier League, yeah, but Premier League, same thing about Zlatan, guys like that, like Cavani. Premier League though, like great at PSG. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but it seems like the kid's still growing. I mean, he was looking down at Gabriel. I mean, he's got to be like 6'5", 6'6".
Stay
now,
humble.
It feels like.
Stay humble.
Stay humble, mate. Listen, his explosiveness, his power, his finishing, his technique, he's going to miss a lot of goals. He's going to score a lot of goals. I'm happy for him to get a goal in something like this because this whole narrative of not scoring, it was kind of like the Romelu Lukaku type narrative where he's going to score both little goals, but he's not going to score them against the big teams. So it's not feast or famine. The consistency is outrageous. I mean, there's nothing right now outside of injury that's going to stop him from doing what he's doing. I think I'm more interested in his career arc and his decisions for where he's going to play his club football, because he's obviously not a one club guy. He's doesn't seem to want to stay at one club. And with Kylian Mbappe going to Real Madrid, I wonder what that looks like maybe for him in the future. Understanding whether it's Rodrigo or Vinicius or even Goulet, throwing Mbappe a little bit wider and putting him up top. Yeah, listen, as of right now, there's nothing to suggest that he can't be the greatest striker of all time with the trajectory that he finds himself in with scoring these goals.
Probably not at City, though, because next year, of course, they'll be playing like Stockport and Rochdale and Doncaster Rovers and whatnot.
By the way, all jokes aside, do you think January, I mean, there's nothing to suggest that they wouldn't try to go find themselves the next Rodri?
Yeah. I mean, someone said to me today on the text line on the show, in the European Championship final, Rodri went off at half-time for Spain, and England were like, "Oh, we've got it won. We've got it won now." And then they brought on like Zubimendi, who ran the
Yeah.
game. I wouldn't be amazed to see him at City in January, replacing him at City as he did for Spain in the Euros final. That wouldn't shock me. They're going to buy someone.
He'll walk right into the local lawyer's office with literally a briefcase of 35 million. He'll say, "Here's my buyout," and then Pep Guardiola will be sitting in the car. So come here, come on, bud, let's go. Sit right
Here we go. Come
There
on.
we go. That's
Take
right.
us away, driver. Take us
Too
away.
bad about your boy Calvin Phillips. I guess he can't recall him from his loan for the season.
It should have been me. Oh, that's on Calvin's car stereo right now. Listen, that's enough on City Arsenal. Of course, we'll come back to those two teams across the season. Bit of housekeeping. Thank you to all of our new subscribers. Great to have you with us. And thank you to everyone who's left us a review as well. If you do leave us a written review, I will read it on the show. We get quite a few, so I won't do loads, but I got 2 this week that I really, really liked, so I thought I'd bring them to you. And thank you for writing your reviews. Please leave us a 5-star review wherever you are listening to this podcast. 5 full stars, please. Even if, like one of our reviews last week, who said it was almost perfect, but they hated the way Danny said Tottenham, don't make it a 4-star review because of that. 5 stars we want. 5 stars. And if you can write one, fantastic. Here's a couple for you. This one comes in from, I love the Twitter names, Shiggity Shank. Shiggity Shank. They say, what more could a Columbus Crew fan ask for in a podcast featuring Crew legend Dunny and Crew superfan Tom Rennie? Seriously, if you like footy, you need to listen to this podcast. Yes. Thank you, Shiggity Shank. Good name. I hope that's your real name. If I have another baby... If I have another baby, that's what
we had a blast in Columbus, by the way. We had so much fun.
Such a good time. We should do more shows together in America. We should do that. That's,
we should.
That's a thing we should do. London sucks. And this one from Ooch33, which I thought was great because it references our friend Tim Horsett, who produces this show. Finally, after all these years of scouring the soccer web, I found the 2 doinks, which is Rennie and Horsey, responsible for me getting all these soccer-related emails. I'm now a fan. My email is chunkylover69@hotmail.com. And the reason he sent that in is I always say that's Tim's personal email, but I've just realized it's not Tim's personal email. It's actually Ooch33's. So there you go.
Wait, so that's really his email?
Apparently.
And we've been messing around this whole time about that?
He's occasionally get emails about, like, the Baltimore Ravens and Liverpool, and he's like, this is where I arrange dogging or something. I don't know. Sorry, Ooch.
Yeah, maybe you can see it. Sorry, Tim.
Anyway, 5-star reviews. 5-star reviews, solid written reviews. And remember, if you're listening to this as a podcast, it's available to watch in its entirety on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, lovely to see you. Subscribe around your friend's house. You can also get a podcast. Right. There you go. Spotify, yes, absolutely. Subscribe everywhere. Subscribe everywhere. You can watch it on Spotify as well, which is great. Anyway, look, let's move on. Let's get to West Ham Chelsea, because I have 2 angles on this.
I hate you.
Well, I know.
This is all your fault. I hate you.
Yes, you put them 4th in your Giorgio mug picks, which I advise you not to do, but you did it anyway.
I'm a mug. I'm a mug.
But well, actually, let me do West Ham. Screw it. I want to see what you think about it. But this is what annoyed me about it, right? So Lopetegui has not exactly hit the ground running.
Which part?
Yeah, I could and have gone on for a long time.
I woke up fucking early for this game too. Sorry, Tim. I was up at the butt crack of dawn to watch West Ham. I was like, this is gonna be the game. It's Chelsea. This is gonna be it.
Couldn't believe how up for it they were, as David Moyes mentioned during his beIN Sports appearance. We normally done quite well against Chelsea, so I'm quite surprised by this, which was great. Moisey, honestly, twist that knife as much as possible. If anyone's earned it, it's you, my friend. It's you. But that first 20 minutes where I just couldn't believe how dumb the tactics were. So Chelsea, what do they want from you? They want high line, and they want you to vacate the fullback spots because they have pace in behind and the wingers hug the 2 sidelines, right? This is basic stuff if you've seen Chelsea in the opening couple of weeks of the season. So Juan Lopetegui, football genius, decides, I'm going to push the 2 fullbacks way upfield and invert them like we had the ball, which we didn't. So that's stupid. And then this Nicholas Jackson thing, right? I genuinely couldn't believe what I was watching. So the plan was Edson Alvarez who is so slow, right? Good player. I like Edson Alvarez, but he is slow. He is not a fast player. They wanted him to go tight on Jackson, which you don't do if they want to spin you. That's a really
Effectively,
bad
he was playing
idea.
as a center back, a
He's
deep lying midfielder, like center back. Yeah.
which is insane. And then Mavropanos, who is a crazy man, he's running up doing the closing that Edson Alvarez could have done. And then when Jackson turns Alvarez, he's through. It happened for 2 goals in 18 minutes. It could have happened at least 5 more times in that period, but they couldn't get the pass right. They couldn't find the space. But Chelsea were like, they're still doing this. And Wan-Bissaka's gone off for a run like he's a centre forward. And we've suddenly got 5 against 3 every time we get the ball. He didn't fix it. I was saying it to my friend I was sitting next to in front when the technical group sit in front of us, like his staff, Lopetegui staff. And I was saying before the second goal, it's going to happen again. You can see it's happening. They need to drop off 5 yards and stop the Alvarez thing. And like, I don't know whether Lopetegui staff just speak Spanish, but I was being loud enough that you could hear me. I read the game for you. It was easy. And then in the second half, they're still doing the same thing.
Escúchame.
Just explain it to me, Danny, because like
I can't. What do
it's
you,
so
what do you want me to
obvious.
do?
Well, I mean, you've
What do
worked
you
in
want
this
me to
game.
do?
It's if it's obvious for me.
Not in that formation. I haven't.
What was the thought? Why did you think it would work? What did he think was going to work?
He played a 3-4-2-1 to deal with the transition moments, and yet was trying to. You guys had more passes than Chelsea had. You guys, I mean, the whole buildup. You guys were at your most vulnerable moments with the ball every single time. You literally set up your tactics to keep them in front of you, and you didn't. You
No.
did. And by the way, Mavropanos, the time the ball goes around him, he doesn't even like go at an angle to close down to try to double up. He just runs to the top of the 6-yard box and waits for a cutback ball. Like I don't know what I'm watching. I
No.
don't. And all I know is that ain't it. That ain't it. I can tell you that.
Is he
And
going to
really
last, Lopetegui?
Well, he f***ed up my Giorgio mug, that's for sure. Sorry, Tim.
I mean, long way to go. Someone sent me. I think they were taking the piss, but they sent me Mikel Arteta's first few games, or when Mikel Arteta took over at Arsenal, it was like they were at 4 games and 1 point or whatever. And so, like, don't judge the first 4 games, blah blah blah. But like, you know, jeez, I mean, it's been so bad. Guido Rodriguez.
Your boy.
Somebody explain to me Guido Rodriguez and tell me one attribute Guido Rodriguez has that James Ward-Prowse doesn't have. Like, he is slower than Rodriguez. He is not fit to the Premier League, unlike Ward-Prowse. He can't take a corner or a free kick. He's got no leadership abilities. He got taken off in the 38th minute for Thomas Soucek for being too slow. Imagine Thomas Soucek comes on because he's faster than you. How slow are you? You know? Just
anyway. I don't see it. I don't understand it. But like our good friend Andrew Williams, former producer of Counterattack, once told us, the season doesn't start till October.
That's true. To be fair, I always think it doesn't start until 10 games in. But yeah, it was less. There was less people there at the end than there was at the Arsenal game that was 6-0 last year.
You guys were fucking terrible.
True.
Sorry, Tim.
What about Chelsea briefly? I mean, look, West Ham were awful and they left the door swinging wide open. But you know, they've got a lot of good players. They really do have a lot of good players. And if they can be disciplined, I don't know, they could do something.
Well, yeah, 3 wins, a loss, and a draw. They're gonna. I think the challenge for Chelsea is to take the experience of what they did last season with Pochettino, the trending which was up, which still, now that we know there's a disaster behind the scenes with the ownership or the whoever's in charge, that had more to do with Pochettino's departure than anything else. But I think that this is a group of players, regardless of who the manager is, that's going to win a lot of games because it's virtually impossible. It's a very, very talented group of players. I still think there's a majority of Chelsea fans that have to Google the name of their players in the starting 11 because there's been so much change. I'll take my little pop shot and then exit quietly. But I think overall, they continue to show that guys like Nicholas Jackson, even a Jadon Sancho, are capable of doing some great things. Listen, at the end of the day, it's an updated roster. You're not dealing with Mudryk in the starting 11. You know, you're able to bring in difference makers, even Joao Felix and Jadon Sancho, that type of quality alongside with Cole Palmer and Nicholas Jackson. I heard your bit on Monday, no longer calling him Miss Jackson, And that wasn't
Woo!
like, yeah, it was because he was missing a lot of shots. He's going to get a lot of goals this year. I mean, what did he end
Yeah,
with? Like 15 in all competition? It wasn't that he
something like
wasn't
that. Yeah,
scoring goals.
it's okay.
It was that the goals that he was missing were so glaring with the chances and the opportunities. So, yeah, I think Chelsea are going to be just fine. I think they're going to be hovering around a European spot. The question is, can they find the consistency and self belief, or will there be kind of a death rattle like there was last year, which upends a pretty prominent point, part of their season.
Going to be so annoying when they win the Conference League. Um, Final bit of the conversation bit of the show before we get to our winners and losers. MLS playoff. We're getting very close now to MLS Cup playoff. We're very close. We have 3 teams in the West and 3 teams in the East that have clinched their spot. In the West, it's Galaxy, it's Real Salt Lake, and Colorado Rapids. In the East, it's Inter Miami, it's Cincinnati, and it's our friends at Columbus Crew. Good bit of the season, this, isn't it? Because there's so few points across all these teams,
Yeah.
and even something like the derby this weekend, the Red Bulls against NYCFC, it could be so decisive with like 3 or 4 games, and you go from we could still win it all, finishing 7th, to you got no game for months on end.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time.
Yeah, it's the complexity of the playoffs in Major League Soccer. And for those that are familiar with it, it's the top 9 teams in each conference will make the playoffs. It starts with a best of 3 series. And the idea of, the better finishing teams getting home field advantage, you're going to get 2 of those home games to the front 3, should it go that way. Listen, I think and by the way, as we're recording this, we've got LAFC against Sporting Kansas City, the U.S. Open Cup final on Wednesday night over on Apple TV. That's our version of an FA Cup final. It's something that right there. That's my Open Cup final win right there with the Columbus Crew back in the day. We took down the LA Galaxy at historic Crew Stadium, and Lamar Hunt, whose name is on the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup trophy, he got to lift the trophy for us, which was awesome because the Crew Stadium the historic Crew Stadium was the first MLS soccer specific stadium in Major League Soccer. So that was cool. Yeah, listen, I think right now is about momentum. And even teams that are playoff bound with momentum or lack thereof is interesting. Like right now, even Real Salt Lake tying that game against Portland, Colorado Rapids, Houston Dynamo, Seattle Sounders, Portland Timbers, a ton of momentum. Minnesota United, not a lot of momentum, but FC Dallas and Austin and Sporting Kansas City just can't find any type of wins to maybe take out the team right now that has the equity of points throughout the course of the season, but can't buy themselves any type of win. In the Eastern Conference, I'm not sure who wants to make the playoffs. Toronto's on 36 points, but John Herdman boldly stated publicly the other night after the loss against Columbus that Lorenzo Insigne's got to stay on the field. Lorenzo Insigne pulled himself off the field down 2-0. And so Herdman went to him. And that's a bold strategy considering the guy makes $14 million. Yeah, interesting to see how that works out.
Yeesh.
Philadelphia Union, as long as they make the playoffs, they're a team that nobody wants to play against. Montreal, I don't think is good enough. Atlanta United, I don't think is good enough. Nashville hasn't been good enough all year. DC United, without Christian Benteke's 19 goals, I shudder to think of where they would be in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And Chicago, once again, has proven that it's been another wasted year. So, yeah, that those final 2 spots between 8 and 9, you've got effectively 6 teams in these last 4 games that can make a playoff spot. We know Inter Miami had that chance to break the single season points award, but they've had a few significant hiccups with the last 2 games and drawing those 2 matches. I think Orlando's a team you got to pay attention to, even though they lost at the weekend. Charlotte finally got on track after not winning the previous 5 games. And New York Red Bulls and NYCFC, maybe a semifinal, maybe a conference final. But I think the big dogs are Miami, Cincinnati, Columbus in the Eastern Conference. The Western Conference, LA Galaxy, LAFC are the big dogs. But Seattle Sounders has an unbelievable amount of momentum, because I think Brian Smetzer and company, after the first 10 games of the season, I believe they only had 7 or 8 points. And there were like significant calls for Brian Smetzer's tenure to come to an end at Seattle. And without any significant spending, they find themselves within touching distance of second place. They're 4 points out of second place, which is outrageous to think about. So, yeah, it's the fun point of the season. Max and I are down in Austin for Austin FC against Real Salt Lake. Then we're in Portland for Portland against Austin. It's going to be some fun games. I think the final game we're in Houston for Houston against LA Galaxy. So we're right around the corner from locking up these final couple of spots, and with a little bit of a hiccup of the October international window, kind of slowing a little bit down and then ramping it right back up for an extended. I think it's something like 60 some days between the start of the playoffs and an MLS Cup final. So the blessing of the curse of home field advantage and having a first couple buys versus maybe losing that rhythm and that advantage for a team that is playing consistently every 3 matches or every 3 days.
Speaking of Austin, what about the video doing the rounds of Matthew McConaughey in the top corner? Now, do you
Banger.
think that was real, or do you think that was like that David Beckham video from all them years ago when he like whacks the ball across the beach and it lands, I think, in a bin like 1,000 yards
Yeah,
away or
yeah,
something?
yeah.
Is it real?
Like the Ronaldinho with the white Nikes when he was
Yes.
smashing them off the crossbar.
Or like
I do.
Messi with the Messi with the bottle had one, didn't he? And it was
Yeah,
like I forget what he did now. Did he kick the free kick through the bottle and it span and landed or something like that?
something like that. Yeah. No, I do think it's real.
You
I
good?
am efforting that to be a part of our broadcast on Saturday night down in Austin. But I did I did, he hits it top bends. He's to the left of the 18-yard box. He picks out the upper right hand corner. And I think MLS's tweet was, all right, all right, all right.
Got to.
I
Have
got
to.
to. Low hanging fruit.
You're not gonna quote failure to launch, are you?
Yes.
Anyway, that's our big story to the week. Let's get to heroes and villains. Danny, give us your hero of the last 7 days in the world of football.
Ooh, hero last 7 days. I'm gonna go with Evander, the Portland Timbers, number 10. He's gonna be up for MLS MVP. I don't know if he's gonna win it. I think he's one of the best number 10s in Major League Soccer. He broke Diego Valeri's goal contribution over the course of the season. I believe it's like 16 goals and like 20 assists now he just hit. The free kick he hit in the 90th +2, the game time goal at RSL, was his 11th game with either a goal or an assist, which is just incredible to think about. Phil Neville joked around with us that he was his agent because he's been playing up to pander that Evander is the best number 10 in Major League Soccer, even though he knows Lionel Messi's Lionel Messi. But that free kick was extraordinary. Goalkeeper Gavin Beavers, the 19-year-old, starts to cheat to his right-hand side. He goes goalkeeper top left corner, kisses the underside of the crossbar, and just walks away with like kissing his finger, like, I got it. Start doing this one. I saw him. I saw him. So yeah, my hero is going to be Evander.
I like that. Mine's also, not a Premier League one, but I'm getting convinced by all of our friends at SiriusXM FC about the quality of Serie A and just how wild it is. So I watched the Milan derby on Sunday, and as you know, there's something that really grabs me about locals and fans scoring for their teams. I love the fact Alexander Arnold and Mark Noble sound like they're from the area. And the winning goal scored in the very last minute of normal time by Matteo Gabbia, a local kid who's a Milan fan who'd been a supporter of the club his entire life, come through the academy and all that sort of stuff, scoring an 89th minute winner in a Milan derby where Inter won the last 6 in a row. No one had ever done 7 wins in a row. No one thought Milan were going to do it. There's the whole kind of Fonseca story. I read something hilarious this week that they were considering sacking Fonseca and bringing David Moyes in, which I thought was very funny and I wanted to be true. So I did want Inter to win.
I saw Tuchel. It was supposed to be Thomas Tuchel too.
Yeah, that's probably more realistic than David Moyes. I don't know, but the Moyes one did make me laugh, considering that Moyes got replaced by Lopetegui, would have gone to Milan if it wasn't for the fact that the Milan ultras were like, "No, he's sorry, Tim," and they might be getting proved right on that one. So that's my one, Gabbia. But also, you could say that the goal from Pulisic's pretty decent as well, isn't it? I really enjoyed that. And there was a video doing the rounds on social media of American corrections to European things, and it was like, Pulisic scores, he is world class, what the is a kilometer? Which I thought was excellent.
Yeah.
It was really good.
I love that.
Sorry, Tim. It was very funny. I enjoyed that. That's our hero suggestions. Give us a villain.
I'm going to go with Eric Ten Hag and Manchester United. That's a game in which they should have been up 6-0 in the first half without Dean Henderson standing on his head. I thought that Andre Onana had 2 incredible reaction saves as well to come up with. He looks more comfortable, right? More secure with his positional play and his understanding, not as reckless. The fact that I think we have a good idea what the back four is with Luke Shaw not available. that it's going to be Delo, it's going to be Lisandro Martinez, it's going to be De Ligt, and it's going to be Mazraoui. The fact that they didn't win really chaps my ass. Sorry, Tim. I would also like to point out, because for the sanctity of me being a Manchester United homer, I absolutely thought Lisandro Martinez should have been shown straight red for his challenge.
Awful.
For all of the talk from PGML, Howard Webb, and company about, eradicating challenges that endanger the safety of your opponent, there couldn't be a more perfect example of, and I don't care if he caught him or not, the fact that you jump up and you 2-foot jut out towards the top of the ball to make sure you're coming through the ball and getting the redirection to get the player. For me, it absolutely should have been a red, even though he's one of my favorite center backs in the world right now. And I am a Manchester United homer. I think my villain is the performance, the lack of points at the end of the day, and what should have been a red card for Lisandro Martinez.
Yeah, Nana was good. That double save you made, I forget who the player following up was, but that was really, really good. My villain is also Man United related of sorts. It's social media managers who post the 411s. There were two things this weekend that really annoyed me, and it was the Man United team and the Brighton team as published on social media. Now, especially if you're doing commentary, I know it's not done just for us if you're doing play-by-play, but if you're doing commentary, it's really helpful if you do it in some sort of defender, midfielder, attacker order. Don't worry too much about getting the exact formation, but if you can just break it down that way, it's really, really helpful. Well, that is not something the social media teams of Man United and Brighton did this weekend. Man United did top to bottom in terms of how many letters were in the players' names. Now, that is insane. That's an insane thing to do and helps absolutely nobody, and also just in surnames. Now, I know we know players as surnames, but if you are going to do it in this way, if they've got a short surname but a long first name, it screws up the concept you're going for. So it starts with Ahmad, goes to Dalot, then Onana, and ends with Mazraoui, Garnacho, Bruno Fernandes. And Bruno Fernandes is only longer than Garnacho because they put the B in Fernandes and the C for captain before B Fernandes. Otherwise, Garnacho would be last. So it's insanity and doesn't help me at all. Brighton posted their team in numerical order, which is the worst, which so many people do, but then they took the numbers off it. So it was in numerical order, but with no numbers. So it's a random selection of players in no understandable order without the numbers on the... Just no! Who is that for? Why are you making this a quiz question? Why are you making this like a challenge on the Crystal Maze or whatever the American equivalent of that is? It's not meant to be a challenge. You're meant to be publishing information to me, not setting me a quiz question. So in future, make it make sense, okay?
Hey, you know what they are, right? Sorry, Tim.
That was this week's Week in the Tackle. That's Brian Dunny Dunseth. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the program, and we'll see you next week.